Mr. Russell DeYoung.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you. And I bring you greetings from Huntington Mennonite Church that is worshiping at this very hour. So greetings from Huntington, and thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. I just recently retired from NASA Langley Research Center, and one of my last jobs was to look at the impacts of climate change on Langley Research Center, as all agencies were required to do that under the Obama administration. And so every day I would see email after email after email about studies about climate change, sea level rise, temperature, disease vectors, on and on and on. And it was kind of disturbing to see all this accumulation of knowledge about climate change. I had to respond to that when I retired, and now you will hear some of my responses to climate change and its impact on me. So I'm a geek, and I love graphs. So I'm going to inflict on you a few graphs, but only a few. It's because they tell a story very quickly. And so I want to kind of lay out climate change, where we stand today. Carbon dioxide concentrations. Carbon dioxide is the main molecule that affects temperature on the surface of the Earth. And this is the 1950, and this is present. This is going back in time 400,000 years. You can get that through ice cores, take out the bubbles, and extract the air. So this is measurable data. And if you look, that sure enough, CO2 varies over centuries, but the historic level is about 300 parts per billion of CO2 in air that we breathe. But look at what's happened since 1950. It's just took off, and now it's about 400 parts per billion. So we're in a region of climate that we've never been before, and actually this goes back to 800,000 years. This level. So something's going on in our world today. And then the next slide. This is the global surface temperature from 1880 to 2017, and you can see this is the average or running average of the temperature, and this 0 is the average temperature over this period. And now we've exceeded the average temperature by about 1 degree C, and here we are in 2017 is the hottest year ever. So every year the average temperature is ratcheting up because of the global CO2 in the atmosphere that traps infrared radiation and it warms the Earth. And of course the next slide shows the impact on sea level rise. This is data from Sewell's Point. Sewell's Point is right over here in the Hampton Roads Harbor. They've been measuring sea level rise from about 1930. So this is actual sea level rise data from Sewell's Point. And this is a model of 7 different global climate models together give this result for what's going to happen in 2100. In 2100, we could get 60 inches. 60 inches is that much. That's a lot of sea level rise. So if you live on the coast, watch out. So because of the there's 2 reasons: because the ground that you're sitting on right now is sinking, and sea level is rising. That's a double whammy for us. And in this area, it's kind of ground zero beside New Orleans for sea level rise. So, enough of the graphs. Let's. Here we are. We're in Virginia, and so you ask, how does climate change impact us? Well, certainly sea level rise, we're very susceptible to that. But hurricanes and sea level and surge, because when you have warmer oceans, you get more evaporation of water, and water vapor is what the fuel for hurricanes. And so the hotter the oceans, the more water evaporates, the bigger hurricanes become. And so we're seeing that. Disease vectors, more mosquitoes with heat, humidity. Temperature rise, people can't work out in those kinds of temperatures. Infrastructure starts to be affected, changing ecosystems. Hardwoods move north, pines move in here. We have our utility partners. The Newport News Waterworks, they have to provide water, and so with flooding, a lot of their reservoirs are flooded with salt water. Virginia Dominion Power. So in the summer, everybody's going to turn that knob way up, boy, and stay inside, and so the temperature, the power load on the system is going to go way high in the summer, but it's going to be great in the winter. And wastewater management at the Hampton Road Sanitation District, because of flooding, their ponds are going to be impacted. So we are impacted in a lot of different ways by climate change. So the next slide shows what the consensus is of all these physics agencies here. They sent a letter to Congress, and I'm certainly not going to read that, but I'd just like to read their consensus statement up here. This is the observations throughout the world have made it clear that climate change is occurring, and rigorous scientific research concludes that greenhouse gases emitted by human activity are the primary driver. This conclusion is based on multiple independent lines of evidence and the vast body of peer-reviewed science. So the consensus on the next slide is the community, and I'm talking about the vast majority of the community, climate change is happening now, it's not something in the future. Climate change is primarily caused by human activity. We're taking those fossil bones of our ancestors out of the ground and burning them and throwing them in the atmosphere. And climate change is negatively impacting our country as a whole. And political consensus on adaptation and mitigation needs to be achieved at both local, state, federal, and of course global levels. It's not one person's problem, it's all our problem. Okay, so you would say that all the evidence is in, why don't we just fix it? We can fix anything. We're all smart people, aren't we? Sure, we can fix this. So what's keeping us from fixing it? Well, I read this report from Brookings, why the wiring of our brains makes it hard to stop climate change. I thought that was interesting. Humans aren't well wired to act on complex statistical risk. We care a lot more about the tangible present than the distant future. And I can give you an example of that. I bet you guys are more interested in what you're going to have for lunch today than you are next Sunday afternoon. Right?
That's true.
Okay, so there's a lot of political issues too. I'm not discounting them, but we tend to think short term and not long term. And this is a long term issue. It's kind of unprecedented. So we've got a number of issues that keep us from addressing this issue of climate change radically. But one of the major issues, I think, is a spiritual context for dealing with climate change. And I want to share with you my perspective on why we desperately need a spiritual context to deal with this particular issue. So next slide. And when we go to the Psalms, the psalmist has some wonderful words of encouragement to us in terms of dealing with these issues. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. For he has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers. We don't own the earth. We are caretakers. And if the stuff you have isn't taken away from you while you're alive, it sure will be when you're gone. So you are a caretaker. And God says he owns it for the benefit of all. Who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? I want to relate this to climate change and relating to the earth. And he answers this question, who cares about what God cares about the earth? Those who have clean hands and pure hearts. Now, hands relates to what we do with our ability. Do we desecrate the earth with our work and our pollution? That's the hands. But also with it has to have a pure heart. We have to have motives that address this problem. So we need both of these. Our actions and our attitude combine to help us deal with this issue. Who do not lift up their souls to what is false. Now, there's a lot of false stuff out there. And if you start looking around, you're going to have to have a good mental knife to separate the falsehood from the truth. The psalmist says, "Be careful. There's falsehood out there." And also, do not swear deceitfully. There's a lot of deceit out there. I mean, there's a lot of economic interest involved. A lot of companies, oil companies, will say climate change is just a natural change, and we just have to live with it, so we can burn all the fossil fuels we want. So there's a lot of deceit out there that we have to deal with. So let's look at another aspect of this. Psalm 65. You visit the earth with water, and you gently enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grains, for so you have prepared it. Water is the essence of life. We cannot live without water, and God has provided plenty of it. And not only that, but He's provided people with grain. So there's enough food in the world to feed everybody. Maybe not on the standard of U.S. Americans, but still, there's enough. You water the furrows abundantly, settled its ridges, softened it with showers, rain, and blessed it with growth. So the earth is a system that produces growth. In all that we need is able to grow. You crown the year with bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with riches, and the riches of grain and food. And that's from my perspective, that's God's purpose, to enrich us and give us all that we need to care for everyone. Now, the pastures of the wilderness overflow. The wilderness, even the non-agricultural wilderness, overflows with bounties. Go into the forest sometime and watch the bounty that you see there. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. They shout and sing together for joy. This is the perspective, because one day we will all shout and sing together for joy because we have overcome this problem that the world has of climate change. And our spirituality has to incorporate the vision of joy and singing together, all of us together. And without that, we can't sustain. It becomes a spiral down into negative thought and activity. So one day, this problem will be solved, and the whole earth will sing for joy. And the next, because I come from a Judeo-Christian perspective, Paul in Colossians mentions Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in Him all things in heaven and earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers, all things were created through Him and for Him. So, if I claim to be a Christian, and I don't care about the world except to exploit it for my personal benefit, what does this say about my relationship and my duty to follow Jesus? I think there's a big disconnect. So I've got to be very, very careful, because in this passage, Paul's saying that Jesus, the creation was made for and through Jesus, and if I pollute it and don't work that for the benefit of all, I'm really not following Him at all. I'm following myself. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So let's change gears now and go from grounding, spiritual grounding, to practical application. Everything we do, creation, is significant. From squashed water bottles to net energy zero worship centers. You say, what the world's that? Well, nothing we do is significant. My current wife, Casey, and I went to Harrisonburg, and on the way back, we went down 81 and up 64, and some of you have been to Afton Mountain, and we stopped there to have a little bite. And it's in that scenic outlook, we just drove in and stopped, and oh, what a beautiful sight. It was a beautiful day. There was no clouds, it was no fog. You could see for miles. It was just God's creation, beautiful. And so we got through our food, we went back in the car, and Casey walked out in the parking lot. And she picked up this squash water bottle. And she took it over and put it in the trash can. Wow, that's interesting. That's pretty minimal. And, does that make an effect on anything? Yes, it did. It affected me. I saw it. It encouraged me. Not only that, there were some other people there. And I think they saw that too. And that's what we need. We need examples of creation care that other people see. So it's incredibly important to be out there where people can see you caring about what God cares about, creation. Now, we can't go through every example of creation care, so that was sort of mundane, and I'm trying to get to more grandiose, but fill in the blanks between. So let's look at some other ways. This is Huntington Mennonite Church. We have a net zero energy plan. 15 we upgraded to LED lighting. 16 we bought Dominion Energy credit so that the energy that comes into our building comes from a renewable source. We pay 12% more for that capability. In 16 we installed 4 electric vehicle charging stations. In 19 we want to install 400 square meters of photovoltaic panels on the roof so that we go net energy zero, and we're paying about $15,000 a year to Virginia Power, and now it will go to zero. And 22 will install geothermal units and get our efficiency of our building down. But anyway, this is just the plan, and so I'll show you how we're doing with the next slide. This is our church right here on Huntington Avenue, and here are charging. There's 2 charging stations. There's 2 charging stations. There's charging on each side of there. That's a volt being charged, and so if you all have an electric car, come on over. Plug in. It's on all day long. We'll load her up. So what we're trying to do is it's out front. So we want to encourage people to drive, because a lot of CO2 comes from transportation, and so this will help somewhat deal with that. So we try to make a statement. It got the publicity on the front page of Daily Press, and that's how Pam got a hold of me. So she called me after that. So on the next slide, this is my late wife, Pam. She died of ovarian cancer in 2015. And there's a lot of things you can do to memorialize your wife, your former wife. You can do a lot of things, but I thought, why don't I set up the Pam DeYoung Net Zero Energy Fund? So I'm giving a bunch of money yearly to the Mennonite Creation Care Network, and they're going out to all Mennonite churches and asking for proposals to put solar photovoltaics or wind power in their church buildings to go to net energy zero. And I'll give them some money for the photovoltaics and also for charging stations for 9 more years. So what we're going to do is encourage Mennonite churches to develop a net energy zero plan, to provide grants for Creation Care Network, through Creation Care Network, to provide renewable energy. We're going to provide examples of net energy to the greater church, provide a base of experience in renewable energy systems, and communicate our desire to protect God's creation for future generations. We don't want to be hypocrites. We care about God, we care about His creation, we want to show it. Next slide. So, this is, anybody been here? Anybody been to Tassville, Vermont? I've never been there before, but Casey and I went there a couple weeks ago. This is the building, Tassville Chapel Mennonite Church in Tassville, Vermont, and this their worship space and fellowship space, and then of course they can go underground with a big fellowship hall. A vital congregation, and the next slide shows what's unique about this place. This is the back, and you can barely see it, but there is their solar photovoltaic panel. They have gone, because of their energy load is low, they have gone zero energy from the power company. In fact, they generate so much energy from this panel that they give it to a Mennonite camp some distance away. And so not only are they supplying their own needs, but they're helping supply the electric needs of a camp. So this is the first successful demonstration of the net PAMI and net energy zero. And this is, well, this is where we're headed. This is where we all sing and, for joy together. When we have an economy that creates goods and services and recycles everything so very little comes out of the environment. We build things that last much longer than they do now. We take the GP, gross domestic product, off the pipeline and fund it other ways. And so when this happens, we'll all sing for joy. Thank you for allowing me to be here today.